For Lecture 3, we're going to focus on how HR can become a valued department within the organization. It's incredibly important that you not only learn the basics of HR, but you also understand what it means to hold HR as a strategic function. To that end, this lecture will present you with some concepts from another class in the HR program, linking HR to business success, as well as some consulting best practices. Remember that the best HR professionals always look at what they do and the organizational choices they make in a strategic and business-focused way. To start, let's talk about stakeholders. These may include the C-suite, managers, investors who look at the company from a financial standpoint, employees, and so on. HR will be considered a valued contributor when it helps various stakeholders succeed. Some of the ways this value is increased is through first understanding the business context, that is, knowing the expectations of internal and external customers. For example, what do external customers need or want from your organization? Are they, for instance, looking for high customer service? Are they looking for on-time product delivery? Conversely, what do internal customers need? Perhaps communication, support, or resources. Second, we need to understand the outcomes that the organization needs to be successful. Knowing what the organization needs to deliver, to produce, to manage, etc. To be successful, knowing how the organization defines success, and then developing HR strategies that have high impact. Putting together programs or practices that support customer or internal needs and expectations. As well, it includes providing information for better decision making. So, providing data to support decisions, such as, if opening up operations in a new country, looking at things like, do we have people who speak the language already? Do we have folks that are ready to relocate? And so on. So, let's look at how HR can strategically align itself with the organization. You might hear that term a lot, as it's extremely important. First, we might look at the company's business strategy. You might hear this referred to as the business goals or annual plan. But a business strategy by any other name is driven by many factors. Some of those include external market factors, like creating demand and shaping the competitive environment. It's driven by organizational factors like what are the company's core competencies, products, structure, culture, or the political environment. And then what are the people factors, including leadership and management competencies, the ability of the organization to develop and retain talent. All of those go into the company's business strategy. Then there's the human capital strategy. That relates to the people, skills, the knowledge, and the capabilities that are needed to carry out the business strategy. As an example, if the business strategy was to increase product sales, do we have employees that are knowledgeable about the product, that have strong sales skills, that have good client relationship skills, etc.? We're looking at what kind of people skills are needed to drive that business strategy and make it successful. And almost any significant change in the business design or the business strategy will require a change in the human capital strategy. They should link and work very closely together. Last, there's the HR service delivery strategy, and it needs to be responsive to the organization's business strategy. It needs to be aligned to support the implementation of the organization's human capital strategy. In our earlier example, HR should recruit, should train, support talent that are able to deliver on the business strategy of increasing sales. For example, do we have the right compensation program in place to incentivize sales? Are we recruiting for the right skills? You can see how all of these elements should work closely together and be in alignment for optimal efficiency and organizational performance. Kenichi Ome says that without competitors, there would be no need for a strategy. Corporate strategy thus implies an attempt to alter a company's strength relative to that of its competitors in the most efficient way. So if there was no competition, obviously there would be no need for a particular strategy. When you think about business, it's important to understand certain external elements dealing with the organization's customer. You should be asking yourself or striving to ask these questions. Why do customers do business with your organization? What do customers expect and what do they see as the organization's strengths and weaknesses? We in HR need to understand the linkage between HR practices and the customer. What's very disappointing is that relatively few surveyed HR professionals receive data like customer surveys or feedback reports that customers have provided. It's unfortunate because HR should be very concerned with those types of metrics. We should understand what the customer thinks of our organization and what they expect, so we can deliver the people strategies to support those expectations. We need to understand our human capital, and human capital are all of the skills, the experience, and the knowledge that reside in our organization's workforce. It's all of those things that produce key business results. Human capital strategy is a system. It's a set of management practices that produce the right workforce for the business and manage that workforce in a way that optimizes the firm's performance. We also need to understand and develop human capital strategy to help produce a sustained competitive advantage that improves over time. The strategy develops core competencies or integrated knowledge sets that we have within an organization, and that distinguishes it from its competitors and delivers value to the customers and stakeholders. Sustained competitive advantage through our people is achieved if these people obviously bring value, if they're rare, and they're unavailable to competitors. If they're difficult to imitate, they have very specific, very refined skills, and if they're synergized with the colleagues and peers to collaborate and share and produce. Companies will know they've arrived at an optimal strategy if they can answer two questions. First, is their human capital more valuable than their competitors' human capital? Second, has their human capital improved year after year? Human capital, just like any other investment, needs to show an improvement. It needs to continually increase. An effective HR strategy is one in which HR aligns its priorities to support the company's human capital needs to be able to achieve measurable business results. For example, strategies that stress creativity and innovation will require HR to tailor their selection criteria to ensure that creative and innovative people are hired and that these virtues are rewarded in the pay and reward schemes. Effective human capital management improves the performance of those in critical roles, those people with the biggest impact on corporate core competencies. Success is when a company can state that our people outperform our competitors' people in roles that add the most value to customers and shareholders. Success is not world-class talent. It's world-class performance. An organization might have the best talent that's out there, but if they're not performing, if they're not engaged, it really doesn't mean a lot. Some typical HR strategies might focus on things like managing talent, and that might include strategies around should talent be recruited externally, or should we focus on growing or nurturing employees that are internal? Another is around performance, deciding on the use of instruments and practices to stimulate employee performance. Then, of course, an HR strategy needs to look at costs, cost containment, reducing headcount in the organization if possible, looking at time work. For example, is there a lot of overtime and how can we deal with that more effectively? Looking at wages across the board. And also managing rewards. Are rewards linked to or are they independent of performance? Is there a balance between financial and non-financial rewards? These are the types of things that an HR strategy would define. Basically, those HR strategies that maximize the use of people and continue to grow their potential without undermining their commitment and their level of engagement are those strategies that are most likely to make the greatest impact on the organization. Being strategic, as it says, means having an impact on the things that are most important to an organization, those things that are most important in supporting achievement of corporate goals and objectives. They include activities, policies, procedures that impact the value-creating potential of employees. Ulrich defines HR by the activities it performs, not by the value created for customers, investors, and employees. Looking at the value created, not just at the activities that are performed. If you haven't read Ulrich, it's highly recommended. He's a prolific writer in the world of HR. HR is strategic when it has an impact on things like financial performance, the work environment, the organization's competitive advantage. When it's creating an environment to impact employee satisfaction and engagement through unique talents and competencies. When it acquires, nurtures, and retains top talent. When it is forward-looking and future-oriented. HR is strategic when it's a proactive force within the organization. Strategic HR contribution changes as the organization moves through its life cycles. For example, when it's going through formative cycles of the organization when they're just forming, when it's brand new, HR obviously is going to be focused more on tactical and building the organization. But those strategic HR contributions are going to change as the organization grows, as it matures, and even if it goes through a declination. HR also has to obviously be flexible to shift the strategies when the organization's strategy shifts. For example, if the organization goes into a global network, if they introduce new product lines, if they introduce new services or new customer bases, HR needs to be able to look at what they're doing and say, is this aligned with the strategy? Are we supporting the organization's strategy and where they're going? Lastly, here's a quick test from Paul Kearns to see if a human capital strategy exists within an organization. It asks, does the organization tolerate underperformance? If you think about that, if we tolerate underperformance, how can we have a high-performance strategy? Second, does the organization cap its reward schemes for the majority of employees? If rewards are capped, so there's a ceiling on the amounts received, what is that saying? What's more important, salary costs or added employee value? Where is the organization putting its strategy? Food for thought as we move forward in this class.